I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Ms. McNear, you do roll call.
Mr. Anderson.
Present.
Mrs. Emerson.
Here.
Mrs. Ganthos.
Here.
Mr. Hawkins.
Present.
Mr. Ramirez.
Present.
Mrs. Sullivan-Weisskopf.
Present.
Mr. Vanover.
Present. All right, Council, first item before us this evening, we have the minutes from the February 19th meeting. Are there any additions or corrections? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to adopt. Second.
Motion second. Any further discussion? All right, all those approving the minutes as published signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain.
One abstention. The minutes are approved with 6 affirmative votes. All right, I guess Mr. Jones, we'll turn it to you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Actually, I'm going to turn things over to our building official, Carl Lamping, to make the introduction.
Okay.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I want to thank you for the opportunity to introduce a new employee, a full-time property maintenance employee, Daniel Blaylock. Daniel has been joined the city of Springdale in January 2020, and to my knowledge, he's the first full-time property maintenance inspector on our staff since Brian Ward left, I think close to 2 years ago. We've had part-time contract people. Dan brings to the city staff a wide range of experiences ranging from quality control to security. He has experience in naval aviation, where his primary duties included the maintenance of large aircraft. He's been recognized by his fleet commanders, and he voluntarily separated after 14 years to focus on his family. After separating, Daniel earned his bachelor's degree in workforce education development, where he specialized in instructional systems design. He has worked with large organizations during lean process improvements as a financial advisor, professional career counselor, and more recently as a food production manager for a large locally based food manufacturer. Dan was born in his parents' home on Ruskin Avenue, and he is part of a select group that have the honor, I use the word honor, to claim the city of Springdale on his birth certificate. As his father, who also served in the Navy as a corpsman during the Vietnam War and an EMT for the city, was the person who delivered it.
Wow.
Daniel graduated from Princeton High School in 1992 and still lives here in the city of Springdale with his wife, Brandy, and they're here today. Why don't you come up? I'd like to introduce. You're welcome.
Thanks for having me. I just wanted to keep it short, and thank you for the opportunity to serve the city.
Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. All right, communications. Ms. McNear, are there any communications this evening?
Nothing this evening, Mr. President. Thank you.
All right. At this point, I'll open the floor for communications from the audience. Is there anybody in the audience like to address council for any reason? Second call. Third and final call. We'll close communications from the audience. We have no ordinances or resolutions this evening, so we'll move to old business. Is there any old business to bring before council this evening? All right, new business. Ms. McNear.
Thank you, Mr. President. Council, you have in your packets a liquor license request from Streetscape Holding LLC at 11711 Princeton Pike, and it's coming from LTL Ventures LLC and Patio Suite L, 4200 Arrow Drive, Mason, Ohio. This is the Blue Ash Chili facility. This is a transfer. It is a D5, and a D5 is spirituous liquor for on-premise consumption only, beer and wine and mixed beverages for on-premises or off-premises in the original sealed containers until 2:30 a.m. Are there any concerns or issues with approving this item?
I don't see any. Mayor Webster.
Three meetings ago, I think we were requested to write a letter to the liquor board
saying we had no objections to these folks transferring the liquor permit from their Mason store down to the Springdale store, this Blaze Chili. And so this is just the official request now from the Liquor Control Board to approve it, or to see if we had any objections.
Good. All right. I don't see any.
All right,
so-
we'll take care of filing the paperwork. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Hawkins?
Thank you, Mr. Vanover. Question for Mr. Jones. I'd seen an email that went out today, and I think everybody on council was CC'd from Matt Schroyer regarding a question with regard to the rental inspection. I don't know if you got the chance to see that yet or not. And I'm assuming since it's today, you may not have addressed it or responded, but I just wanted to check and see if anything had taken place and if you had any comments with regard to the interpretation that Mr. Schroyer had versus some of the discussion he listed in the email.
I appreciate that, and Mr. President, I'll actually turn this over to our attorney. We've had some discussion with the building department, and we will be getting back with the Mr. Schroyer on the letter, but I'll turn things over to Joe at that point.
Yes, Mr. President. I wanted to let council know that I did meet with Mr. Lamping before the meeting tonight, and we looked over the legislation together, and we're going to go back and look at the history of that legislation because it was passed and then there were some revisions. I've advised Mr. Lamping to send an initial letter back to the individual who wrote that, indicating to him that we're reviewing it, and then I'll report back to council if we need to make any revisions to that policy, primarily to make sure that it is written to effectuate the intent that council intended. So I've just tonight looked at it, and it's probably my preliminary review that we will want to make some kind of a revision to the language, but I'll bring that back to you at your next meeting.
Thank you.
Mayor Webster?
Something's fallen through the cracks here, because I know for a fact that we changed that to say that we would only do inspections when they had a change in tendency. Mm-hmm. And so, but Carl, in researching the thing, once he gets the letter, the legislation doesn't reflect that. So I think we need, I think it was, my recollection says it's like June of 17 that we passed that revision. I haven't had a chance to share that with Carl, but he brought that to my attention this afternoon. And I said, yeah, that's, Mr. Schroyer's right. We changed the law. We do not inspect, you still have to pay your fee. We inspect the outside of the house, but we do not go inside the house. And this was a change of tendency.
Mr. Braun?
And just to add, I think that may be correct. That's why I was cautious about saying exactly what we need to do. It's possible you did pass a change that's not reflected in our ordinance book. That happens on occasion. But because it predates me, I can't even rely on my memory. I'm going to have to go and historically look at it. But I'll definitely get you some kind of timeline about what happened. And like I said, if it does need to be revised, it's possible you gave instruction to revise it and it never happened. I know that's about the time you were changing legal counsel as well. So it's possible that that was something that just didn't happen. But I'll definitely get back to you, and we're going to let that individual know we're reviewing it.
Mr. Hawkins?
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, I just want to make sure, because it was a big issue that we went through, and we want to make sure that's right. There was some constitutionality, I think, that was in question, an issue in terms of Fourth Amendment rights. So we want to make sure that's correct. I do have one other issue, unless somebody else does. Thank you. I want to make sure, with regard to Mayor Webster administration, that any time that there is a circumstance where there may be potential litigation, the council is made aware of that, and that the law director is made aware of that. Just want to make sure everybody's on the same page. That's it.
Okay. All right. New business? Mayor Webster?
Let me respond to that. So, in my discretion, if I think it's going to lead to legislation or litigation, yeah, I would pick up the phone and call the law director. But in my estimation, I think the topic you're talking about did not rise to that level, and so the law director was not called, and he would not be called in the future.
Mr. Hawkins?
And Mayor Webster, I appreciate your opinion on that, but that's concerning to me that you would find that that's not something that you'd need to at least explore that with our law director.
So every situation comes up, I should call the law director?
If there's a situation that I think leads to potential obvious litigation, yeah, you should check the law director.
Okay, thank you for your opinion.
To be clear, you disagree with my opinion, is what you're saying.
I think there's a fine line there. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, and I think that most of the time you're going to have somebody sitting in the mayor's office that's not a lawyer, and I think you have to use your best judgment. And, you know, I think we're going to talk about the subject that you're talking about here in executive session tonight, and I think after we talk about it, I think you'll understand why the law director was involved in that. And I'll share some other instances with you where the situation has been handled without the law director and without counsel's knowledge. Or maybe with, let me rephrase that. That we've sought legal counsel, either with our in-house legal counsel or labor counsel, and handle a situation without it coming to council. Now, I'm not sure if you're asking, if you want to make sure we seek legal advice, or if you want to make sure we come to council with it.
I think if there's a situation where it is, and I think this is something that has the obvious potential, and so we may disagree on that, and neither of us are employment attorneys. I'm not an employment attorney either, but anything where there's obvious potential litigation, I think it's important to check with law director. And it's important, I think, to let council know, because everybody on council would be named on that complaint, as you know. And so I'm just saying, for us to be aware of what's going on, I think is important. That's what my point is.
I agree with half your statement. I think we should definitely seek the advice of the law department, but whether we bring it to council or not is, I think, our discretion.
I'll respectfully disagree with you.
Thank you.
Mr. Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm not aware of the circumstances being discussed that you mentioned that we'll get into later. I just want to make sure I understand from a policy standpoint for the city. We have a policy handbook. Is there anything in our policy handbook that has administrative procedures that we can rely on for what circumstances, at a minimum, would require some consultation with law director or referring back to council to make us aware of? Or is everything that is potentially litigious completely within administrative's purview to decide whether it should be we should be notified or not? Is there anything in the policy handbook that we should be aware of, or is that something that we will end up looking at?
I'm not aware of any policy handbook that guides administration on what they say and don't say to city council.
From an HR standpoint, so any kind of, you mentioned HR issues, if there's those types of issues, there's nothing in the policy handbook that we would expect that you would do that. So what's being asked about now may be a new request. Is that what we're saying? To notify council. There's nothing in the policy handbook today that talks about notification.
I'm not aware that there's even a policy handbook that guides what the mayor says to city council. Okay.
And that's what I'm trying to understand. And HR functions inside the administrative branch. Still, is there an HR manager that you rely on that has policy handbooks, or is this entirely within your discretion?
I think you're asking the same question, if I understand what you're saying.
Well, my question is, do we have HR policies that have notifications?
There is no HR manual that guides when the administration should go to city council.
And that's what I'm asking. Is there? And you're saying there's not.
Right.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Still in new business? All right, well, each of you should have a copy of a letter that I received this week from Mr. Coleman, and he is requesting a increase on the Civil Service Commission. And I think before we deal specifically with this, that we also need to go back and take a look at all the boards and commissions, because I don't think that we want to do a hodgepodge, and I think that we need to keep everybody, you know, on an even plane, so to speak. So I'm going to, at this point, request from the administration that we get that data, and then at a time in the not too distant future, then that we delve into it and look at that. So, all right. Still new business. Any more? All right. Ms. Emerson?
Thank you, Mr. President. I make a motion that council go into executive session pursuant to the revised code, section 121-22G1, to consider the investigation of charges or complaints against a public employee, and section 121-22G4 for reviewing negotiations or bargaining sessions with public employees concerning their compensation or other terms of employment.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, motion second. Discussion? All right, Ms. McNear, you poll council on the executive session.
Mrs. Emerson?
Aye.
Mr. Ramirez?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Mrs. Ganthos? Aye. Mr. Hawkins?
Aye.
Mrs. Sullivan Weisskopf?
Aye.
Mr. Vanover?
Aye. Council will now retire for executive session. Administration, do we anticipate any action, legislation coming out of this at this time? Okay.